So, my name is Stephen Kelly. You're all very welcome and good morning. I'm going to talk to you about Akonadi models and proxies, the Q model view implementation that we have that we use to implement Akonadi, the next generation KDE PIM stuff. Do you all know what Akonadi is? Roughly, even. So it's an interface for, sorry?
If you don't know, don't be shy.
It's an interface for accessing all of your PIM data. So a generic interface to access your emails, your contacts, your events, notes, anything at all really. And we've got some models and proxies to help build applications to access all of that stuff. Have any of you ever tried to implement Q-abstract item model? A few of you. Q-abstract proxy model? Anybody? Anyone have a song about it? No. Katrina's not here this morning. So not to worry, I'll be guiding you through everything that we have about that today anyway. I'll be explaining a little bit about the model view concept, what it is, why we do it, some of the features that we use in Akonadi and the model view stuff, and how they help to create applications faster. Some of the challenges we faced in the framework, it wasn't always doing exactly what we wanted it to do. And I'll show you how you can reuse the proxy models that we have in Akonadi for your own applications if you want to do that, and how to unit test them. So conceptually, you could have some different applications like an email application, a contacts application, an events application, which might want to talk to each other. If you compose an email, you want to get your contacts out of your address book for your email completion in your to field. You might want to invite somebody to an event. And basically that means that you need to have some kind of communication between well, some way of accessing the data that typically the application takes care of. One way of doing that would be to make the applications talk directly to each other. That has a lot of disadvantages because, for one thing, you need all of the applications running at the same time. You could get locks and all kind of bad things if two applications try to write to the same file at the same time. So really, that's something that you want to avoid. But that's roughly what the situation was in the KDE 3.5 times. So for KDE 4, we have Akonadi, which is an interface to access all of your data. And what it does is, instead of accessing your contacts from your K-address book application, you access them all from Akonadi. And it takes care of making sure there's no conflicts, you know, two applications writing it at the same time. And the other applications don't even have to be running at all. And essentially, Akonadi is a model in all of this. This is, at a high level, it's a model view architecture. Because the model is the interface to all of the data, the applications are kind of like views. So they just pretty much watch the data that's in Akonadi and present it to the user. If it changes in Akonadi, it gets changed in the application, you know, instantly. Then inside each of the PIM applications, say inside Kmail, we have a Q-abstract item model representing all of your emails. So what that does is it communicates with the Akonadi server, and it says, give me all of the emails. And so it has a subset of all of the data, and it puts that into a model, which can then be put into different views inside Kmail. So you might be familiar with these kind of things, just Q-tree views, Q-list views. And similarly, in a contacts application, you again just have a model representing all of your contacts and some views for accessing different contacts. So, oops. This is an example of how that could work using Akonadi. The main model that we have in Akonadi is called the entity tree model. It's essentially represents just all of the information that you have in Akonadi, but you can filter it by type. So I can say I only want the emails, and then that's all I get. Or I can say I only want the addresses, the contacts, and then that's all I get. Or I can say I want both for some reason. I'm not sure if that would really make any sense, but you can do that. And so far, I've got one model, the entity tree model, and one view on the left-hand side showing everything. It's not really the way I want things to be, because if you recognize Kmail, you'd have a tree of folders on the left-hand side, and you click onto one of them to get a list of emails, and then you can click the email. The documented way to get that kind of behavior in Qt is to use set root index on the view to essentially just take part of the model and put it into the view instead of all of it. And that's what I've got in this tab. And essentially, well, you can already see one disadvantage. I haven't even clicked anything, and I've got a lot of stuff where I want my list of emails. It's possible to work around that, but not very easily and not very nicely. But you can see that it does generally work, mostly. Another problem we have with it is it gives me collections that I'd really rather filter out. I only want my list of contacts here in this view. So there's no real easy way to do that using set root index. You could filter out the rows in the view, but that's not a nice way to do it. Another advantage or disadvantage we have here is I've only got gibberish in this list here. What I really like is the names of the people. So what I can do to get that is subclass the entity tree model and tell it that the items that I have in this model are contacts, they're addressees. And then I can tell it that in the first column I've got the name of the person, in the second column I've got the email address. In the header I've just put the name in the subject, because in most of this demo I can view other contacts or emails. So it kind of makes more sense that way. So one of the ideas that I came up with was that rather than using set root index to access details on each collection, the list of addresses or emails, I came up with a proxy model called the K-selection proxy model, which takes the selection that you make in one view and makes it part of the model in another view. And so you can immediately see that I can filter out the folders that I don't want. So I didn't want the work collection in there. All I had to do was filter it out in another proxy model, and I get just exactly the effect that I want to view my emails or my contacts. And so that proxy model is very generic. You can use it in any KDE application that you want to, and it's got a few different configurations that you can use. I've got 3 of them here. There's about 5 configurations in total. I'll just explain some of them. So you can see that I selected number 2 here. So in the subtrees configuration, it shows number 2 and all of its children. If I select 7 as well, And I also get 7 and everything that's in that. And you can select anything that you want. And you can also see that in another configuration, I just get 2, 7, and 16. And so it's kind of hard to see here, but if the Kmail favorite collections view works in this kind of configuration, it has it makes a hidden selection if you configure a collection to be a favorite. So I'll see if I can show that actually. So if I say that this is, well, I can't add that to my favorites. Ah. Okay, well, unfortunately I can't show that feature.
You have to show it in Kmail. It's not exposed in the console.
Has that been removed? I don't have Kmail with Akonadi right now. So another feature that we sometimes want in Akonadi is to be able to check a collection to include its items in the view. You have something like this in KOrganizer, where you select a few collections of events, and you say that I want these events to be in my calendar, and you uncheck it to say I don't want it to be in my calendar anymore. And so this is actually again based on the selection proxy model. It makes a hidden selection, but it has the advantage that you don't actually have to select things to get the items in it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the application. And KLRM will use this kind of feature too. Again, excuse me, because all of this is based on a model view kind of architecture, the models don't know anything about the views. And that means that you can use a different view than you might normally have. So what I have here is a view taken from Dolphin, which looks at the list of things that I have available and categorizes them. So these are addressee objects. And I can also select my emails, and they appear as well categorized. So I was able to just lift that straight out of Dolphin. It's also used in the system settings module. And that's really just one of the advantages of the model view architecture. That kind of reuse is really a great advantage. Finally, I can show that I can organize all my things by tag instead of by where they are. One of the advantages of a traditional way of dealing with your PIM, one of the disadvantages is your stuff is organized by where it is. So you've got some stuff on an IMAP server, you've got some local contacts in your hard drive, and you've got to access them differently, navigate through a different folder structure to access them. But one thing that we can do with NEPA-MUC is to organize them by tag. So I've got some addressees and emails here tagged with different tags. And I can access them just by clicking on the tag, and I get all of my contacts which are tagged with that tag, all my emails which are tagged with that tag. And well, you can see that this kind of way of interacting with your stuff might be better. It might be a useful thing to have in a Plasmoid. If you switch to your Akonadi activity, you can get your list of all of your emails tagged with Akonadi. regardless of where they are. You know, whether they came to a POP account, or an IMAP account, or a Colab account, or just something you copied to your local hard drive. So I think that will be a good direction to go in the future. Another nice advantage of this model view architecture is we can write views for different form factors. So something like contact assumes a big screen, you know, but if we want to make it work on a mobile device, we need the UI to be mostly rewritten. Probably using QML or the item views next generation stuff, which they're coming out with flick scrolling and, you know, just nicer features. And with the separation that we have between the model and the view, that means that we get a lot of code sharing. We estimate that we can probably share about 80% of the code between your smart client on your desktop of Contact and the mobile device. And that's because of things like Akonadi and K-MIME, all the core stuff that we've been writing over the last few years. So there's a real advantage in that. So last thing I'd like to show is just one of the unit testing features that we have. Obviously, with all this complicated stuff going on, we need a good unit test suite. And so I've got a way of unit testing any proxy model at all by setting it up in a particular way and just executing a command on it to insert items or remove them. So there I've inserted a bunch of items here at the top, where I can insert them in the middle. And using that, I can put a proxy model on top of that and just test that it always behaves the same way in the right way. So I've got some hundreds of tests for these proxy models now, just making sure that they don't break again. And hopefully that will also be useful. So I've shown you a little bit about the model view architecture and why we use it. I've shown you a little bit about how the models that we have in Akonadi can be put to use to create applications, to divide up the data in different ways and let you interact with it the way that you want to and visualize it. And some of the ways that this could go in the future of organizing all of your stuff by tag and accessing it that way. And, well, here's just a run of the unit test. I didn't get to show you that, but some of the hundreds of unit tests that get run. So, are there any questions? Yeah?
Is that a little example program that you had, like TM usage, I think it was? Is that available anywhere, the source code for it?
Yeah, that's an SVN in KDE PIM/examples. So you can play around with that. The other one, this one is in KDE libs. In KDE libs/KDE UI tests, proxy model test app. So there's a bunch of proxy models here that you can play around with and just see what they do. So there's this nice one here which will turn any list of items into a tree. So at one stage in Kmail, we get a list of items and we want to turn that into a thread. You know, so we've got a generic proxy model which can be used anywhere in KDE now. for turning it into a thread just by implementing one method, the isDescendantOf method. And so that'll be useful not just for threading emails, but also for turning a list of tasks into a tree of tasks with subtasks and that kind of thing. And you can implement it any way you'd like. There's just some examples there. So you can see how to use it and what it does, how it works. Yeah.
Steve,
Yeah,
sorry, can you go back to that?
sure.
He's being extremely modest here. This is really, really cool. This is fully scriptable, so you can use this little scripting thing down there to basically reconfigure the proxy models on the fly with a little scripting syntax. That's insanely useful.
Is that QScript?
This is CuteScript in this little box, but typically you'll implement this thing in C++. So, but yeah, so I can add a new list of things to thread here, and I can say that 12 and 11 should be below 10. So 10, 11, 12. Oops. And it just does it. So yeah, it's kind of useful in that way.
I'm guessing since you use it for mail, it must be really scalable to thousands of items, do you think?
I have not benchmarked it yet, unfortunately, but it will need to be. Yeah. There's some disadvantages with mail because you could have an email stuck in a mailman server and not getting through. Say it was number 10. But you'd still want the rest of the thread to be threaded. And when 10 comes in, it should be going in the right place, and everything else should be then a child of it as needed. And so that will introduce some slowness because you need to handle all of those cases correctly, unfortunately. But yeah, it should be reusable in lots of different places in KDE. Yeah.
So that's it. The cool thing here is the JavaScript added part, but of course it works
Right.
just as well. You can write that stuff in C++ directly as well if you want it to be fast,
Right.
or if you can after it.
You could, yeah. I mean, this one here is just a really simple implementation to get it to work and get it visible and usable. Yeah. Oops. Well, so that's it anyway. I'll post the links to both of those applications on my blog if anyone wants to be.
On the dot.
Okay. All right. Is that it for questions? I think so.
Add something.
Yeah.
One thing you left out, which I find insanely useful with these models, is that you have, because it's one entity tree model, which has all the types in one model, you have one view-level cache, which means the whole thing about which bits do I need to keep in memory and which bits can I purge from memory is done in one place. So whether you use the contact from 17 different views or just one, you have one place that takes care of all the data caching. Because that's really complicated to get right if you're dealing with several, like those of you who've done more view stuff will know this, right? So this is another thing that this adds. It takes care of all the view-level caching.
Yeah, I didn't really mention that, but when you click through each of the folders, they get populated lazily. So the items are not actually fetched from Akonadi until you click. And as you click through, the folder that you clicked 5 clicks ago gets purged because, you don't want to fill up your memory with emails that you're not looking at anymore. So that was kind of complex to get right. There was some reference counting stuff going on.
How do you, just curious, how do you handle the case where there's a folder and if the folder is like, sub trees and loaded until the user clicks on that item? How do you know whether to show like the plus or plus icon?
The collections are always fetched, but not the items. And we have a feature in Akonadi for determining whether the plus should be there or not, because Akonadi knows whether it has emails in there. There's a class called collection statistics. So it tells me there should be 5 emails in here. So the model says put a plus on. And so you can expand it that way. All right.
With the caching, if you go back to something you've just seen, in most applications, there's some locality of data, which means you will be probably there's a high likelihood you'll be going back to the data you just looked at already. And you do want to have that still in memory. So there's like a sliding window of stuff that you keep in memory to be able to go back without having to refetch it. And that's all totally generic, so it's reusable.
Right. And its caches all the way down. So, yeah.
So, is this going to be part of, what is KML going to have? What's the timeline for Akonadi?
4.5.
4.5?
Yeah, well, KDE already uses Akonadi, and it already uses all of this model stuff. So hopefully that will iron out all the remaining bugs that we have. And when KML comes around too, it'll just work as we've planned. Another 6 months to make sure that happens. So.
The reported version is actually landed in Trump this morning.
Right.
So it's kind of dangerous to build KDE from Trump.
Yeah. Use the 4.4 branch of KDE PIM, please.
You put a big ass disclaimer in there saying don't use this for productive use.
This will lose your data in 4.4, in trunk, sorry. So yeah, use 4.4. All right, so, is that it? Thank you.